Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I hope that everyone is enjoying this outstanding program. Certainly, I know that those of us who feel strong connection to New York Lawyers for the Public Interest appreciate the opportunity to gather, even if it is virtual. Certainly, we have all been living on Zoom. We have all been living from our dining room tables for the most part. But in this difficult time, it is the connections that we choose to make and the conversations that we choose to have that really highlight the values of this and any organization. And so today, I am so delighted to be able to have a conversation with two outstanding individuals, two award recipients of the day, our outstanding honorees. Let me again introduce to you Eric Grossman, Jami McKeon. Let you get a great look at those awards and have them say a quick hi. You've heard about the outstanding work that they've done. Many of you know both Eric and Jami. You know that their commitment to the organization runs deep. And most importantly, you know that their commitment to social justice is part of who they are. It really is part of the fabric of their work up to this really important inflection point in today's society. So let's start with that as we start to have a conversation about race and social justice in probably one of the most challenging periods we've been in since the heyday and the height of the civil rights movement itself. I'm going to jump right in and start with some of the important work that both of you guys are doing in this field. Jami, in particular, we all watched with, frankly, horror as we saw George Floyd lose his life in front of the world. But you took action after that. You and your colleagues formed the portion of the firm called Mobilizing for Equity. Tell us about that and tell us, what are the goals and where is it going so far?
Thanks so much, Loretta. You're right. Mobilizing for Equality is Morgan Lewis's response to the issues that really have plagued us all for quite a long time. But I think this summer they really came to the fore. And we decided that we wanted to institutionalize the things that we think are really important to effectuate real change. So I asked our partner, Grace Spades, to lead Mobilizing for Equality with me. Grace is, of course, one of the country's most prominent Black lawyers. She and I have each been at Morgan Lewis for more than 30 years, and we have shared a commitment to this important cause. So we formed our Mobilizing for Equality Task Force. It has 14 members from all levels and all parts of the 31 offices of our firm. And under that, we have 14 working groups. And these working groups range from voting engagement to community volunteerism to economic development and investment to impact litigation. But we also have working groups that are focused internally, transforming the next generation, educating ourselves, conversations about anti-racism and privilege. And maybe most importantly, we have a working group called Measuring Our Progress, which is designed to really keep us very, very focused. And we're trying to involve our clients and our communities in these working groups. We've also seconded some of our folks, including one to NYLPI, I'm delighted to say, working to serve organizations that are led by Black and Brown individuals. So we're really trying to make a difference and making a long-lasting difference and trying to do our part, just as your firm, Loretta, and Eric's company are being so active in this space as well.
Thanks so much, Jami. I'm particularly heartened when you talk about measuring progress, because as we all know, if we don't measure something, we're not able to track it. If we can't track it, we really can't determine we are to making real change. Eric, you're in the financial services industry. Obviously, the attention on the issues of social justice is focusing on all aspects of our country, including economic institutions, in particular as how they're looking at these issues of systemic racism and sort of long-term challenges. And you have been very vocal on this issue. And I believe you actually joined a letter with several other general counsels of other financial services firms. Tell us about that effort. What were you highlighting in that letter?
Well, first of all, Loretta, thanks, and Jami, great to be here with you. Jami and I have been talking about these issues well before the recent tragic tragic events, I think that drove us to kind of redouble of our efforts on this. You know, the letter, the joint letter by really the general counsels of the major financial institutions on the planet was really interesting as it came together, because if you note the date of the letter, it was really many months after the murder of George Floyd, and we had a debate amongst us about whether the passage of time made the letter less important or less relevant. And we came down to a person with the view that the passage of time made the letter more relevant and more important. I think my greatest concern after the murder of George Floyd was that there would be, energy around this issue, and then it would fade and pass, as we've seen energy around so many other issues before, whether it's, after the Parkland shooting in Florida, tremendous energy around gun violence, and in particular gun violence in schools, and still no legislation, still no change, and I think, and I shared this with my fellow general counsels, a real concern that the passage of time actually required us to continue to do more and say more and be public about what we wanted to do collectively. Now, recognizing when you ask 12 people to get together to agree on something, that's hard, because we're in different businesses and different geographies. And of course, we have different track records, for lack of a better word, and which is true, of course, across the law firm community as well. But we thought we would focus on three key elements. One was our internal efforts. One is external efforts. So how can we help with external change? And then, of course, what can we do in terms of direct contribution for social action efforts? The internal efforts, which I can talk about, but we're really a continuation of what we had started in both the legal and compliance division, which I'm fortunate enough to run, but really the firm as a whole in the years that I've been at the firm, which is now 15 years. But last year was indeed an inflection point. And strangely, and we had some personnel changes, which I could go through, but which were really impactful, but I won't. And we created this Diversity and Inclusion Institute, which is going to be critically important to drive our programs internally, but also the how you measure it, Loretta, which you touched on, which I think is without question, we've all in the senior leadership of the firm come around to the view that if we don't have tangible goals, that they're going to be hard to hold people accountable, and people do need to be held accountable. But one other step that we took, which I think to those outside of Morgan Stanley, it's hard to appreciate how critical this was, but we put up on the wall as our fifth value, commitment to diversity and inclusion. And this is something and at Morgan Stanley, we talk about culture a lot, right? How does a financial institution distinguish itself from others, which is, for us, it's always been our culture at Morgan Stanley of doing the right thing, leading with exceptional ideas, putting clients first, and giving back to our communities. And we had over the years debated, where does diversity and inclusion fit? Well, of course, it comes from doing the right thing and leading with exceptional ideas, and giving back to your communities. And therefore, we didn't think we needed to call it out as a separate value. That was an analysis we had done. We decided last year, you know what? No more. It's going up on the wall in every Morgan Stanley building. Every conversation that we have with a new employee where we talk about our values will be a commitment to diversity and inclusion. Every conversation when we get our senior leadership team together, we will talk about a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And then we will marry it with these other, the work of the council, and we will deliver tangible progress, and greater than we've done so far. So those were the internal efforts. External efforts, look, we're going to continue to pressure the law firms to do more. We rely on the law firms for the folks that we hire, particularly certainly on the legal side. We cannot do this alone. There's great work. Jami highlighted the great work that's being done at Morgan Lewis. Paul Weiss, you guys, and you and your partners have been, of course, market leaders here for years in promoting a more diverse and inclusive partnership ranks, which of course is highly commendable to Paul Weiss. And then, of course, lastly, social justice initiatives. We've really doubled down on our pro bono commitments internally and externally as a way of helping to actually help individuals, because there's the collective work, and then of course there's the individual work, and neither is more important than the other.
Yeah, so well said, so well said. But, let me circle back to the issue of the law firms, as you mentioned. Jami, as you mentioned, you and I have both been in practice for some time now. And I think it's fair to say that all three of us have seen similar initiatives like this before. The push for diversity, particularly from the client base, the even with stated goals, even with specific clients, talking to our colleagues and all of us about pulling people into work and making sure that there is this pathway and this pipeline. And I think, frankly, we all have to be very candid and honest and admit that the legal profession, for whatever reason, makes great efforts, but has not been able to bring this home. And when we look at the results, when we look at who stays in the law in general, who stays in the larger organizations in particular, and who rises to the leadership there. And so we've had a lot of great efforts and discussion and intention before. What is it that makes this moment different in your view, Jami? I mean, what are we doing differently? What are we seeing differently? And if we're not seeing it, what do we need to see?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's not like this is a new topic, right? We have all been focused on this, but I want to pick up on something Eric said, because I really do feel that the past year gave us an inflection point, and we've all realized that we just have to be a lot more intentional. And I think we're seeing a lot of things that give us hope that we are making better steps toward change. First, the point you discussed with Eric, our clients are no longer just asking questions, making suggestions, expressing a preference. Clients are insisting on seeing real progress in terms of diversity and inclusion. And there could be nothing more important, I think, than your entire client base who is really expecting that of you, because it's not only an imperative, but it's also a license on the part of all of the law firms to really move forward with some of the programs that before have been more internally facing than externally facing. I think second, we're all looking at ways that we can expand the pipeline, that we can improve success rates. So a couple of the things we're doing at Morgan Lewis, we decided that we needed somebody focused on recruiting diverse talent specifically, a much broader reach, no specific law school, no specific geography, across the board, across the entire firm globally, somebody focused on recruiting diverse attorneys. And we're seeing an impact of that. So our summer program last year had 92 fantastic law students, 67% of whom identified as multiracial and or LGBTQ or both. So we really saw a terrific response, and we've been seeing an improved number of people coming into the profession. And we're also working on pipelines before people even get into law school. But then once people are in the profession, I think for a long time we all figured, okay, great, once everybody's here, it'll all work out for everyone. And instead, we now have 4 professionals who are focused specifically on working with our practice groups to help develop individual programs for our diverse lawyers, specifically our Black and Hispanic lawyers. And I have asked our leadership, people on our advisory board, on my management committee, some of our strongest practitioners individually to sponsor and work with some of our highest potential Black and Hispanic associates. So I think we're trying to do many more things to really give additional life and effort. It takes time, it takes investment, it takes commitment. I mean, there's just no substitute for all of that. But I also think that we're trying to focus on making people feel truly included. You know, you and I joined the profession when there weren't a lot of people who looked like us. So we know that it can't be entirely that you have to see it to be it, but it makes a big difference when people feel that they're included. So, you know, for example, we had Grace Spates, who I mentioned before, interviewed by one of our more junior Black partners. We had Hy Feldblum, you know, former EEOC commissioner, very proud member of the LGBTQ plus community, interviewed by one of our LGBTQ plus team. And I think having people, the response to that has been so great because people appreciate hearing the path and having that encouragement from people who they feel have been in their shoes. So the bottom line is we all have to do better. You know, at our firm, we've got a lot of women and people of color in leadership positions, but we have a long road to go. But I think that we are getting better as a profession about really refining the way to make this not stall the way it has in the past.
Sure, which is key. It's so key. And I think actually, Jami, you really hit the nail on the head when you said that in years past, everyone who was working on this issue with intentionality, with the best of intentions, actually, sort of had the view that if we focus so much on hiring and bringing people in, then they'll be fine. And as someone who's actually been an actual minority associate in a large firm in my career, I can tell you that sometimes what often happens is out of a desire to treat everyone equally, minority associates often aren't treated any particular way at all. And they miss out on the connections that other associates make because people are trying to be so neutral towards them. And so viewing this with intentionality, I think, is key. But that does raise an important issue. And I actually would love to get both of your thoughts on this as to whether or not you have seen any backlash to your efforts, whether or not you anticipate any backlash to your efforts, and what your thoughts would be on that. I raise this because, look, obviously we're all part of the larger society. We have all seen over the past 4.5 years, a significant backlash to the very idea of seeing people of color in the highest position in the land and in other positions. And as we've seen, unfortunately, it's opened up a number of people to express some thoughts that I think a lot of us had hoped we had moved past or moved beyond. And so as we move with intentionality towards opening up our profession, how do you intend to deal with those issues? Eric, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, this is a super tricky issue, Loretta, as you point out, and it's not a new issue. And companies or law firms that have broad geographic reach, as we do at Morgan Stanley, are, I think, particularly at risk is not the right word, but need to be particularly focused on this issue. So, we have a tendency, of course, we're to be very New York centric or very Washington centric or very San Francisco or Los Angeles centric, very coastal in our views on this issue. And it's a big country. And Morgan Stanley, we have offices in every state of the union, and we have, people with, differing points of view on this. And I think, when one of your core operating principles in terms of, professional advancement is that everyone will be given an opportunity to demonstrate, that they have what it takes to succeed, to advance. This notion of, being a meritocracy, of course, we know comes into conflict at times, not directly, but at times with this question of, okay, well, what are you doing in terms of measuring and demonstrable programs that are targeted on specific subsets of your employee base? And I think where we have landed over the years is you can continue to espouse the notion that the firm is a meritocracy, that every person will be given an opportunity to show that they can shine and that they are eligible for opportunities. On the other hand, back to the point that you made about when you were an associate in the law firm community, we have come to recognize that communication, mentoring, sponsoring, and I think Jami used the word, I don't know if she said deliberateness or intentionality. I think she said intentionality. You can marry those two things and identify high potential talent, diverse, most importantly, and make sure they get what they need to thrive in a meritocracy. Because in a big place, we have 80,000 employees at Morgan Stanley. Your ability to get lost is true regardless of your race or ethnicity. But if we actually want to show progress, we just cannot afford to lose folks who have an opportunity to succeed. So, but that tension does exist. We've seen it, of course. I mean, you know, from your time as Attorney General, the litigation around affirmative action and college advancement and college admissions and the like. I mean, this is still a very, very real issue in the United States. And I do think, though, like lots of things, this inflection point that we had last year, has, even in your most recalcitrant, meritocracy types, they've come to appreciate that if we want to better reflect the communities we serve, we have to do better.
Sure. And certainly, I mean, I think the business case for diversity is strong. It's there. And so I think people can certainly focus on the fact that having different voices in the room makes for a stronger organization, a stronger presentation. And certainly anybody who wants to compete on an international scale needs to take advantage of that. But as you pointed out also, we're not just East Coast, West Coast, large city. Even when people, even in what typically tend to get called the flyover countries, you have people of all different types of thought and different types of views on issues, and highlighting the fact that there's a place for everyone's viewpoint of view, frankly, benefits everyone.
Totally agree.
So let me turn now, Jami, you also have, well, actually, before we turn to that, I wanted to see, Jami, if you wanted to add anything on the issue of pushback or on the issue of some people who might take a different perspective.
Jami doesn't tolerate pushback at Morgan Lewis. There's no pushback.
Well, I don't know that I would say that, but I really do think that when you take smart people and everyone reasons together, I rarely have found somebody who doesn't agree with the basic principle that a more diverse and more inclusive environment is a better one. Just from a lot of different perspectives, it's more interesting. It brings more different points of view and experiences to the table. And we're in a job where what we're trying to do is help our clients solve difficult problems. And having a more diverse team focused on those difficult problems generally tends to get to a better solution. And it's not because one group is smarter than another, or one group is more intuitive than another, or one group is better than another. It's that when we widen the net so that we're bringing people with different ways of thinking and different life experiences and different approaches together, we just get a better, more thoughtful result. So I actually think there's not as much pushback as people think there is to what are the really important core principles here.
Certainly. So, I just want to touch, before we move on to some other initiatives that you're both focusing on, one other issue that I think is really key to diversity. You both mentioned it in the context of your own organizations, but it's the pipeline issue. And again, taking into account the fact that we are surrounded by, the larger world and all of its issues, we certainly are at a point in time when we see people, particularly young people of color, who are expressing a sense of lack of connection to large institutions or certainly to the law in general, and their view of the law as perhaps maybe even enabling some of the injustices that they're fighting so vigorously against. And certainly it's always been a challenge, obviously, to broaden this pipeline. But now that you do have people who are really questioning whether or not the law is helpful, or is the law itself part of the problem, how do you reach out to people and get them to see the opportunities that are there for them?
Well, I tell you, Loretta, if you have an answer to that question, then I'm all ears. But I think that if you roll back the clock, then I shouldn't be the one talking about this. It should be the two of you. But if you roll back the clock, whatever it was, 40 years, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the number of women in this profession was abysmal. And certainly the number of women in leadership positions. And Jami's running one of the most successful law firms on the planet. And Loretta, you were Attorney General of the United States of America. So, and the notion that people would have thought that was like achievable in a generation or two, 50, 60 years ago, would have been shocking to them. But what happened? over time, more and more women went to law school, more and more women saw a career in law as an opportunity, and that would be meaningful to them professionally, personally, and economically, all three of those things. And I don't know what caused that catalyst. I don't know what caused that catalyst, but I know that we're still lacking in particularly in Black and Hispanic communities here in the United States, the sense that law school is a place where you will have a professionally and personally and economically rewarding career. And I think that if we can figure out, and there are all sorts of great bespoke efforts, but you're not going to get to levels that represent the population, I think, with these bespoke efforts. They're critically important, but it's going to require, obviously, more sustained work. Role models like the two of you are, I think, a critically important element of this, and showcasing those role models in communities of color has to be an element of actually changing the dynamic. Mm-hmm. And really that means, I think, on college campuses, if we're talking about the legal profession.
Yeah.
And really, Eric, even before, I mean, we're doing things at high schools often with our clients. And I think it's because we really recognize that you need to get to people earlier on. The point you made, Loretta, it's so upsetting to think that people don't think that this is a place that you can help, right? That this is a place where you can have a really rewarding career and you can really make a difference. And I think continuing to emphasize that. We're also trying to attack this in other ways. We have a foundation at our firm where we provide sponsorships for law students, diverse law students. It's actually a highly competitive project. These people are incredibly impressive. They don't come to Morgan Lewis. That's not a requirement of the program. But we try to help them financially so they can stay in law school. And so that they can make that choice, that they can make that incredible investment of 3 years and a lot of money to go do something and have a commitment to the practice. So I think that's really important too, finding a way to encourage people, to show them the role models, to point out the path, but also to help them financially be able to make that choice, because it's an expensive one.
Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted a very real world issue for a lot of people, which is literally, we talk about access to justice, and sometimes it literally is access to the profession that still stands in the way of so many bright young people. And what a wonderful program! Thank you for highlighting that and for sharing that with us. You also have talked about the need for authenticity, for wellness. Talk a little bit about MLWell and how that fits in with the firm's diversity and inclusion efforts.
Yeah, so we've had for a couple of years now a program called MLWell. It's run by a woman who has a master's in applied positive psychology. And it really was born of a couple different things. One is my belief and observation based on all the things that people were talking about, the challenges that lawyers were facing, the mental health issues, the depression, anxiety, really feeling like maybe we as a profession needed to take some responsibility for helping to give people tools to be able to address the stresses and anxieties that come with practicing law. And then my husband, who himself got a master's in applied positive psychology, so I have my own internal expert and kind of really realized how much value could be added. So we've had this program for a couple years now, and it covers all degrees of well-being, from community involvement to occupational well-being to intellectual well-being, mental health and well-being. And we have a website that's built out that provides lots of resources for our folks. And of course, we were very lucky to have that up and running before the pandemic came along, because now these additional challenges. But I think if you think about it, so much of kind of well-being relates also to what we've been talking about, which is your feeling of being included and authentic where you are, that there's a place for you, that you fit. And so the relationship between authenticity and well-being and success and inclusion, I think all are really interdependent. And so I think part of our focus is our focus on employee engagement. And I think our well-being focus really both drives and reflects the inclusive culture that we're trying to build, that focuses on the whole person, and that whole person being able to integrate their lives into what they do for their living.
I think you've hit upon one of the main issues that diverse attorneys talk about a lot, in no matter what environment they're in, is being able to bring their authentic selves to the workforce and have their authentic selves be recognized, as opposed to set aside in some way. And certainly, I think the larger point that you're making, which is that ML signifies a program from which everyone can benefit. I mean, I've always thought that once we all recognize that, look, we're all different in some way, we all struggle with something in some way, and make that connection, then discussions about diversity get a lot easier, because people then can see that we're all coming from a place of difference, and that difference is a really, really positive thing.
Well, and that's why, if I could jump in, Loretta, that's why
Sure.
the events of this past year were so transformational, because we encouraged folks to come in and talk about things that they have been living with their entire life that most of their fellow employees did not know. So like in my group, for example, we had quite a number of our Black employees come and share with the division, their experiences, driving around in neighborhoods, or just walking down the street, or when they send their kids off to school. And while in theory we all appreciated this, and we've all heard stories, but one of your former assistants, Al Grant, I don't know if you know Alfonso Grant, but Al is the managing director at Morgan Stanley, and he led a division-wide discussion of what it's like to send his kids out, every day into the streets, and it moved people. And I just think that as you pointed out, that was his authentic self. And it was a part of him that he had never shared with his work colleagues, I'm sure, other than his fellow Black employees. And it really has been transformational in terms of creating a kind of safe place now to talk about things that people probably thought were not appropriate to talk about in the workplace. And I hope that we sustain that.
As well as helping and supporting your other employees who may not be diverse, but who want to hear. In terms of realizing that this is going to advance everyone.
Hear and learn, who want to hear and learn, and hopefully will come away with a new sense of urgency and sensitivity around these issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Eric, I talked about one of Jami's initiatives. Tell me about the Business Council for Access to Justice, and how that ties in with your diversity and inclusion efforts.
The Business Council, I joined the Business Council, I guess now it's about a year. I offered to co-chair it with my former partner, Kim Harris, who is the general counsel. I don't know if you know, you must know Kim for sure. Who's the general counsel at NBC Universal. All of us, certainly the three of us as residents of New York, are familiar with the New York. Well, Jami's not actually. Jami's down in Philadelphia, but she's got lots of lawyers here in New York. We're all familiar with the New York court system. In many ways, the most sophisticated legal system probably anywhere in the United States and the planet, and in many ways also one of the most challenging legal systems. With the opportunity for to appeal every decision, and the number of cases and the caseload and the like. And I have, from my work at Advocates for Children, where I'm president of the board, have a very real and tangible sense of how challenging it is for those without economic means to get justice, to get their day in court, to even go to court. Not to mention, Loretta, all the points you made before about a sort of cultural unwillingness to see the value of court and of legal proceedings and the like. And so,
or to have any faith that a court is going to be fair.
Right, that the outcomes will be right. So why bother? Why waste my time?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, why waste my money? Throwing good money after bad, right? If I've got an issue that requires resolution. And so the idea of the Business Council was, can we galvanize the community who appreciate who appreciate as much as anything the importance of New York's court system to delivering outcomes that are favorable to whatever the equities are in any particular situation. Some, obviously you win some, you lose some when you're a company, but you go to court often with if you believe in the rightness of your cause, you go there with a reasonable expectation of a favorable outcome. And sharing those experiences and building programs to encourage programs working across the broad community of providers in this area, whether they be publicly funded or privately funded, like NYLPI and others, to lend our support and also to further grow and enhance our internal pro bono commitment. We have a lot of lawyers. I have globally, my division, we have, almost 700 lawyers, and for years, there was no such thing as corporate pro bono. The law firms carried, 99% of the burden. Well, that's insane. Why? So this was, so all of these efforts have come together with this business council. And I have to say that the take up has been extraordinary. It's not just, to our point before, it's not just a New York City effort. We've got members all across the state: Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, Utica. We've found general counsels of companies big and small. And we're committed to trying to actually use this group to move the needle here in New York.
I'm so glad you mentioned corporate pro bono work, because this, I think, has been the challenge for our profession in so many ways. And look, most of us, all of us really became lawyers because we wanted to do good things in the world. We wanted to help people. And I've actually talked with a number of corporate lawyers at all levels of their career who say that it's very frustrating not to have the same outlet that they perceive is limited to litigators. And so that's been a challenge, I think, for some time. And I want to use that really as a bridge to talk about our final issue, which is probably the biggest issue facing the country today. Certainly one of the oldest issues, and that's the issue of systemic racism throughout our systems of both legal and economic and the like. And the ways in which we're all trying to find ways to both illuminate that issue, the larger issue of systemic racism, and bring the resources of our great profession to bear on that. Eric, can you share with us some of the corporate pro bono that you've seen that you think is particularly focused on the economic challenges and the business challenges that seem to be ongoing and endemic, if not systemic?
Look, our small business initiative, working with our law firm partners, I think, focused in New York principally right now, is I wouldn't say that it is specifically targeted and geared towards systemic racial injustice, but we've come to recognize, for lots of the reasons I noted before, that businesses owned by people of color, for all the institutional or systemic impediments that they have to either availing themselves of opportunities for support or advocating for themselves, whether it be in eviction proceedings or in employment proceedings, like that, they need the help they need pro bono help and assistance. And so, and similarly at our support for Advocates for Children of New York, which I not to talk my own book here, but we serve New York's most vulnerable kids, which are kids with special needs who are below the poverty line, most of whom are children of color and who have not been able to have all of the advantages that have been there for kids of privilege, most of whom are not children of color. And so these not necessarily direct assaults on structural inequities, but nonetheless, and arguably sometimes even more impactful by actually changing lives, live by live or business by business. I think, as we talked about maybe at the very, very beginning of this session, that it is both the collective and the individual that needs to come together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And certainly, opening up opportunities for people who otherwise have to spend so much time and energy struggling to keep a business afloat, struggling to keep their families together, allows them to achieve their full potential as well. Jami, this is an issue that obviously the law firms have struggled with also, as we think about the issues facing the country and the role that lawyers and the law tends to play. We're placed at the highest levels of government. We're placed at the highest levels of business. We do have insight into the mechanisms of the economy and our country. But it has been a challenge to even identify these larger issues of systemic racism and sort of share what that means to people without bringing on the backlash we spoke about earlier, and then finding real ways to challenge it and to try and work within it. Have you been having conversations with clients and the like about what they would like to do along the lines of opening up economic equality, for example?
Absolutely. And let me just, if you don't mind, Loretta, I want to jump on the conversation you just had with Eric, because I believe so passionately that pro bono is a way that we can accomplish a lot of the things that you're talking about. You know, at our firm, we require every lawyer to do pro bono. It's not just for litigators. It's not just for labor and employment lawyers, our corporate lawyers, our tax lawyers, our structured finance lawyers, everywhere in the world. It's not just in the United States. And you hear people say, well, there aren't good opportunities for corporate lawyers, or there aren't good opportunities for people in other countries. Just not true. The sad fact is there's so much need out there. And great organizations like NYLPI make it easier for organizations like ours to find ways that we can give back and that we can help, whether it's child advocacy, whether it's immigration, you know, or whether it's issues of systemic racism. For example, to the point that you just raised, one of the things we're doing is, you know, we've had 500 of our lawyers focused on COVID-19 advice for our clients, you know, just generating work product and thought leadership that clients can use on a wide variety of things, including PPP programs. Well, a lot of our Black and Brown owned businesses haven't had the traditional banking relationships to know where to go for those programs. So we've actually pro bono been training those in conjunction with chambers of commerce and business organizations in different communities as a way to sort of dovetail these two things, right? The pro bono aspect, but also the attacking the systemic racism. And I heard somebody say the other day something, I wish I could remember who it was because I don't like quoting it without giving it attribution. But when we look at our own organizations, if you're not being intentionally inclusive, you're almost certainly being unintentionally exclusive. And so to your question about what we can all do as lawyers, as a society, as a profession, part of it really has to do with examining ourselves, recognizing our own biases. You know, implicit bias is a phrase that people throw around, but all of our partners take implicit bias training, the same training we give to hundreds of our clients, because it helps check you and recognize, wait a minute, let me take a step back. Am I unintentionally, and I really think it's almost always unintentional, am I unintentionally excluding people? Am I not applying the same standards? Am I making it harder for someone to succeed? So I think there's such an interrelationship between all of the things that we can do as lawyers and how we can help really effectuate a meaningful and lasting change in our society. Obviously, you know, with the great support of clients like Morgan Stanley and organizations like NYLPI, if we all work together, I really do believe that that inflection point can effect lasting change.
I'm with you. I'm with you. You know, Eric, I think we've had a great conversation here, but just to start rounding it up, as we look at the challenges facing not just our profession, but our country and the world, we do have here not just great organizations, great corporations, great law firms, great public service and public interest programs and organizations like NYLPI, looking at, frankly, all the challenges facing us. Where are you hoping that we'll go? Where should the law be moving to deal with these issues?
Well, that would require a very long answer. Look, but I think, if in a nutshell, for me, a lot of the great problems that are facing this nation are not getting addressed properly and solved because of our political dysfunction. Mm-hmm. And so just take the police reform as a good example, right? That we still have no police reform legislation that has made its way through Congress, even though there's, I think, widespread agreement that there's the need for police reform. Gun control is another 80% of Americans think there should be enhanced background checks, and you cannot get a gun control bill through Congress. Our political dysfunction, whether it's climate, and what we're seeing is more and more is being done by executive authority, and the Congress doesn't act. And so the law, which frankly makes it very, very hard, whether it's gerrymandered districts in the House or all sorts of challenges to competition in our electoral system. These things all make it very, very hard for us to have actual legislation that's the product of compromise and meaningful reflection of what society, that's, pardon my dog, meaningful
it's okay.
society wants. So that's where I think there's an opportunity here for change, I'm hoping, in the next 4 years.
Real opportunities. Jami?
Well, I mean, I think, Eric said it so well, and it is a big question, and one that I think we're all going to continue to struggle to answer. But I really do believe that acting in concert and acting together, moving forward together, in synchrony together is really the answer. It's got to take the organizations, the corporations, the lawyers, the nonprofit, the government, all of those groups. This is not an insolvable problem. This is actually something where we can make a difference. And the question is our level of commitment, our level of resolve, whether our leaders are really, walking the walk, and whether we're really refusing to accept stalling out again or lack of progress as something that's acceptable. And I think we've talked today about a lot of the different things that people are doing to try to drive that forward. I know, speaking for me, we talked earlier, Loretta, about the length of time we've been in the profession. I don't want to leave this without making real and achievable progress. And so I think if we all feel that commitment, I do believe there's much we can do.
So well said. So well said. Let me thank both of you, not just for today's conversation, but all the work that you both have done throughout your careers that have led you to this point. And by this point, I don't mean just this outstanding award and this luncheon, but to being true leaders, leaders in action, as well as leaders in thought on some of the most important issues of the day. As we have talked about a little bit, if you can see it, you can be it. And I want to thank you for also being an example for so many others who are looking for ways to truly provide real help on these challenging issues of diversity and inclusion. They could do they could look no further than to the two of you and both of your efforts and actions for some of the best examples that we have. So thank you both for your time. Thank you both for your work in this area. And I can't wait to see what you all are going to do next. So thanks to everyone who's joined us for this exciting conversation.